Today we're talking about
Dave!
Hi, I'm Dave. I'm Lil Dicky. Hi, I'm Dave. Who's Dave? Hi, I'm...
The show aired in 2020 and covers the story of the rapper Lil Dicky. Dave is meant to be a comedy, but I would say that the story is at its best when that is not the main focus. Don't get me wrong, the show is humorous and makes me laugh almost every episode. It works when the humor is subtle, but then there are the scenes where Dave takes a shit in the forest or drives over a rabbit. It's easy to assume a show like this would be overly narcissistic, covering the awesome life of a big time rapper, but that couldn't be further from the case. The show has a lot of heart and character. One of the things that surprised me the most when I first watched season 1 was that multiple episodes are entirely dedicated to other characters than Dave. In them, Dave himself becomes sort of like a side character. You wouldn't expect that from a show specifically named Dave, but all the supporting characters have their own personal problems, aspirations, and arcs. The show is also good at juggling between all the characters, and they are surprisingly likable. Except for that one, kinda. The strongest part of the show is easily the dynamic between all the side characters and Dave. Before watching the show, the only song I've ever heard from Lil Dicky is Earth, but that was enough to get me to check it out, and I'm glad I did. To me, he's more Dave than Lil Dicky. I recommend anyone to give this show a shot. You will immediately know if you like this show based on the first episode, and it's only 30 minutes long. It does a good job of setting the tone for the rest of the series, but it does get better from episode 1. For me, the show's biggest turnoff is the drugs. I get that it's part of the rapping world, and I'm not anti-drugs, I would just never try it myself, and I find it pointless in the show, kinda. But it's very easy to ignore, and I really appreciate this show. So much that I want to highlight the best parts of the show, season to season. From here, there will be spoilers, but I would not say that this is a show that is ruined if you know what happens. In season 1, we meet Dave right after one of his rap songs went viral, and we see him trying to navigate through the social world of rapping. No one takes him seriously as a rapper, because, well...
You can always rap about, like, the struggles of a young Jewish man.
Dave struggles with this feeling, and at the same time there is this pressure to chase the views and avoid becoming a one-hit wonder. Season 1 is very light-hearted, but also does a great job at showing Dave's worries and ambitions. It feels like we really get to know him. The first few episodes are also great at setting up the people around Dave. We meet his parents.
This is a GIF.
God, I love those guys. We also meet his girlfriend Allie, his cool producer Els, his good friend and backney treater Mike, this bitch, and the man, the myth, the legend, Gator. The best parts of this show is really rooted in the dynamic between these characters. One of the things that I really love about season 1 is the group's inside joke, "Somebody Suck Me" gets Dave viral. It's also great that we see him struggle trying to become respected as a rapper, but goes from the satirical rapper to the...
You know, I went from being the "my dick sucks" guy to the "somebody suck me" man.
That line always makes me laugh. One of my favorite jokes from season 1 was from the second episode, where Macklemore shows up, takes Dave's gig, and Dave is asked where he bought his jacket.
This is new. Where'd you get this?
Thrift shop.
To me, episode 5 is where the show really went from okay to a good show. The episode follows the perspective of Gator. Dave asks Gator to become his hype man, and we get these great flashbacks of Gator's past where we learn that he's been a hype man before. We also get a much better understanding of why Gator is who he is.
Like really bipolar. Sometimes I feel crazy, and sometimes I feel lazy.
He really opens up to the team and their friendship evolves. I also love the way the episode ends by going back to one of the first scenes in the show, only this time we see it from Gator's perspective instead of Dave's. Episode 6 we get a great backstory on Dave, and episode 7 repeats the Gator success by following the perspective of Els. By far, the season's best episode is Allie's Toast. It opens with Dave and Allie sharing a beautiful moment together, only getting slightly ruined by Dave's constant need for producing the next hit and chasing the rap life. It's really in this episode, Dave's narcissistic personality gives him problems. The entire episode, Dave only thinks about himself, even though Allie is in a stressful situation and needs someone to share it with. He's only with her for a few seconds before it's back to the Dave show. The episode does a great job of hammering that home. It's even reflected in his ability to...
You know I can ejaculate hands-free.
Well, sounds like you don't need me then.
The episode's entire build-up all culminates in a great argument scene and followed up by a very beautiful speech held by Allie. In it, Allie breaks up with Dave, and the track from the beautiful moment from the beginning starts playing. Letting that track play throughout the ending hit like a hammer. The season finale is good, but most of the time is spent on a really dumb music video. While it has its funny moments, in my opinion it just goes on for way too long. The rest of the episode is spent with Dave having a creational meltdown because the label he signed won't release the dumb music video. Dave plans to release it anyway on a podcast, even though it would hurt the people around him. In the final scene, Dave makes the decision to freestyle instead of releasing the music video. I love the freestyle, and his selfless decision works well given his mistakes in the previous episode with Ali. At the end of season 1, Dave is left at an interesting place. He is closer than ever achieving his dream by signing with the studio, but it cost him the person he cared the most for. That is a great setup for season 2. In season 2, we come back to Dave having trouble creating his first album. He is now a legitimate artist, but that also means there's a lot of pressure on Dave. The label and the people around him expect something from him now. And on top of all that, he is still trying to deal with his breakup with Ali. Episode 1 isn't really one of my favorites. The entire episode just gets taken away by a misunderstanding and it feels a little pointless. Luckily, the next few episodes in the season picks up in quality, and it's clear that we see Dave at his worst. He has no progress on his album, he's afraid he's being a bad person, he still isn't over Ali, and we see some, let's call them low points.
Like, I actually think you could probably hook up with that.
Swear to God. Stop. Really?
No!
His mansion gets invaded by ants, and it's clearly meant to be symbolic. To me, they resemble the million insecurities that Dave has carrying around this season. Dave shows up unannounced to Ali's house, which I know from experience is the worst thing that you can do. But they actually start rebuilding their relationship as friends. Episode 5 is the first episode Dave begins to tackle his problems. In the entire season, he's had a falling out with Els because of his jealousy towards Elsa's success. I love how accurately they depict when you're mad at your best friend in their basketball match. However, towards the end of the episode, they make up in such a wholesome way. I really love episode 6 because it has some really great commentary on modern dating. This season's solo episode follows Emma, and you get to see how she and Dave has worked at the same place. You also get a much better understanding of her behavior towards Dave. Once again, the best episode in the season is episode 9. However, this time it's also the most symbolic episode of the series. Dave comes to a new music producer to find help with the album and get out of his creative drought. After he enters a water chamber, the episode go off the rails with symbolism and weird ideas. They did a good job of making it understandable while still exploring a bunch of weird ideas, and it's clear that it's Dave's insecurities that are expressed throughout the symbolisms. You could probably make like a 10-minute video explaining this entire episode alone. If you want me to do that, comment it down below. But let me boil it down to the most crucial moment. Dave meets a bald, rap god type version of himself. It's the most pure part of him, which I see is resembled by the lack of hair anywhere. That means that it's the best musical part in him, but also his biggest ego. He needs to tap into this version of himself. Tap into who he is in order to create music and not doubt himself in every aspect of his life. An anteater shows up as a metaphor for the removal of his insecurities that is resembled by the ants themselves, like we mentioned previously. And that is probably the most boiled down message this episode can probably get, but it is a really great episode. In the season finale, we see the struggling life that Gator has being in the shadow of Dave's success. Meanwhile, Dave is done with his album, but is having problems with the success of it. The label isn't really working with Dave. They're not promoting the album, and they're also cutting the time from his performance promoting the album. In the rehearsals, we see how centered around Dave the entire show is. At the same time, Gator is having much bigger financial and mental problems. The twist in the show with Gator coming up and Dave being the side guy is honestly amazing. This finale is definitely the best in the series, and the rap is incredible. This season really ended off on a high note. In season 3, Dave is on tour. He is where he needs to be creatively and has officially made it as a rapper. Because of this, Dave's big struggle this season is navigating the fame and finding a real connection with another person, aka looking for love. It wasn't before rewatching season 3 that I realized this girl shows up in the first episode, and that really creeped me out. Other than that, the first few episodes are not extremely noteworthy in terms of story, just solid episodes really. We do see Dave struggling to find an authentic connection with somebody, instead going from fan to fan that wants to be with old Dicky but not Dave. Episode 4, we see Dave and Ali go in opposite lanes in the dating space. I'm calling it right now, they're doing this to set them up again in a later season. despite that being completely unnecessary. Anyway, this episode, Allie wants to have a one-night stand with a hot dude, and Dave finds Robin, a very good-looking photographer who wants him for him. Surprisingly enough, she doesn't get scared away by Dave's weird sexual tools. They share a very typical honeymoon phase sort of love in the one night that Dave performed in her city. The next episode, The Storm, might be the funniest episode of the entire series for me. Most of the episode is comedic gold, but once again, we also see the overly obnoxious humor that I really don't like in this show. After a weak first half, the season picks up in a plot point involving Dave mistakenly declared dead. This skyrockets his career and allows a lot of options for Dave, who otherwise was struggling with the problems with the label and cancelling the tour. To keep the stick going, he and Mike decide to stay quiet about Dave being alive, just for a few days. I was really expecting Dave lying about this to have a much bigger impact than it had this season. Dave sacrificing his integrity for success is an interesting idea, but they don't really go anywhere with it. Robin comes back in episode 7 and most of the time is spent building their relationships and problems. Episode 8 introduces a trend this season I'm not a fan of: celebrity takeover.
Boom. You looking for this?
The show has had celebrity cameos before, but previously it didn't distract anything from the show, and it actually helped immerse you in the show. But the problem with episode 8 is just that it wouldn't exist if there were no celebrities. That is all there is behind that episode. It's a big contender for the show's worst episode for me. Every single season, episode 9 is a banger, and this season is no different. Most of the episode is dedicated to show Emma's documentary from the tour. Dave is really confronted with being the biggest narcissist in the world, and it's great to see him try to deal with that. Dave also has difficulties choosing between his authentic connection with Robin or Rachel McAdams, who he met in the last episode. I'm sorry to rail on this, but this is the textbook definition of how not to use celebrities in a show. There is nothing behind Rachel McAdams other than her being Rachel McAdams. But I will say that the Mr. McAdams song is a banger. This season finale can be summed up in 2 words: Brad Pitt. The episode is hilarious and one of the funniest in the show, but it doesn't feel like a finale. It feels like a perfect mid-season episode. Brad Pitt is hilarious and great in this episode. I'm just used to so much more from this show. The last 5 minutes tries to save this by setting up happy endings for the side characters, and Dave gets to meet Drake. Great, okay. In conclusion, Season 1 is by far the best and most solid season. Season 2 has better high points than Season 1, but it isn't as consistent. Season 3 is still good, despite me giving it a lot of shit, but between the 3, it is the weakest one. Dave is an amazing show, and I hope to see a Season 4, but I also hope that it doesn't continue down the path that Season 3 set up.
Raindrops are falling on my head, and just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed, nothing seems to fit. Those raindrops are falling on my head, they keep falling.